Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Point in Time Count 2023 data release public presentation. As Chris mentioned, my name is Akram Alturk. I'm ECHO's Research and Evaluation Director, and with me today are Claire Burris, ECHO's Research and Evaluation Manager, and later we'll be joined by Matt Malika, ECHO's Executive Director for the Q&A. I'm going to hand it off to Claire to kick us off.
Thank you, Akram. Appreciate everyone for their time here today. Next slide, please. All right, so first, we will be providing today an overview of the point in time count, also known as the PIT count. Then we will take a look at the data that we collected in this year's point in time count, starting with the overall totals, then going into the geographic distribution of the population experiencing homelessness. And finally, we will wrap up with an analysis of demographic groups and other key subpopulations. And lastly, we will briefly discuss efforts that our homelessness response system is making to respond to the homelessness crisis in our community. So, starting with what is the point in time count, just some level setting. So the point in time count is a methodological tool that allows us to understand the scope and characteristics of the population experiencing homelessness in our community. This is helpful in our efforts to end homelessness community-wide, as it provides insights as to where we should be targeting and funding services in the community. The PIT count is an estimate of the number of people who are experiencing homelessness in our geographic region of Austin and Travis County at a single point in time. Here locally, we conduct the PIT count every other year for our Austin and Travis County area. As a continuum of care, or COC, in Austin and Travis County, we are federally required to conduct these counts within the guidelines provided by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The federal government uses the data that we and other continuums of care across the country collect in order to make programmatic and budgetary decisions to address homelessness nationally. So to explain a bit more in detail about what our community did on the night of the 2023 PIT count in late January, we had over 700 volunteers split up across 74 geographic sections of the county and city, each led by a team lead. Those volunteer teams conducted both interviews and observational surveys of unsheltered individuals that they encountered between 3 a.m. and 8 a.m. in the early morning hours of January 28th. At the same time, our shelter system recorded their overnight residents in our homeless management information system, also known as HMIS, and we utilize this data to measure the scale of sheltered homelessness on the very same night. So here is what we found in the 2023 point in time count. So on January 28th, 2023, our community in Austin and Travis County, Texas, identified a total of 2,374 people experiencing homelessness at that single point in time. Just over half of those individuals counted were unsheltered, meaning that they were sleeping outside, in camps, in cars, or in other areas not meant for human habitation, such as construction sites or abandoned buildings. This was our first unsheltered point in time count since January 2020, as our community did not conduct in-person unsheltered counts in 2021 or 2022 due to the risk presented by the COVID-19 pandemic. And the remaining individuals captured here in that 1,108 were spending the night in emergency shelters or transitional housing programs in our homelessness response system. So to compare with prior years, looking back at our PIT count data since 2017, the number of people identified as experiencing homelessness over the years has been incrementally, steadily increasing. It's worth noting that 2020 was an exceptional year. In 2020, our sheltered count was down and our unsheltered count was up substantially. As pit count methods and the staffing of our homelessness response system changes from year to year, we're not very surprised to see some variation in the scale of the count and the breakdown between sheltered and unsheltered estimates over the years. But the trend is definitely clear here that our count has been increasing over this longer period of time. So one thing that we can look at between 2020 and 2023 that provides a lot of insight as to how things are changing is the geographic spread of the unsheltered population. So we have seen a good amount of change since 2020 here. In 2023, our volunteers counted a greater number of unsheltered individuals in point-in-time count sections further from the downtown core of Austin, such as in South and Northwest Travis County. Next slide, please. Here, we're using the same geographic data, but visualizing it in the form of heat maps. So it's a little more visually clear here that the spread of people living unsheltered has expanded out from central Austin since 2020. On the left side of the slide here, you can see the distribution of the unsheltered population across city council districts. It's important to note that although District 9, covering much of central Austin, contains the highest concentration of our unsheltered count for 2023, that this district has also experienced a 35.2% decrease in the unsheltered population residing in that district. District 5 notably saw the highest increase in unsheltered residents from 2020 to 2023. Taking a look at the same data, but now by Travis County Commissioner Precinct, it is clear in the map to the left that precincts 3 and 4 contain the highest concentration of the unsheltered population in Travis County. However, it's worth noting that the geographic distribution of the population is more evenly distributed across precincts than it once was. So in 2020, the unsheltered population was much more densely concentrated in precinct 3 than we now see in 2023. We also analyzed the geographic distribution of the unsheltered population using the boundaries of City of Austin-owned parks, nature preserves, and green belts. In 2020, approximately 5.2% of the unsheltered population counted were found in these city-owned areas. And in 2023, that percentage rose to 13.6%. This is a substantial increase that allows us to understand the story of geographic spread outward from the downtown core a bit more clearly. So I know that that was a lot of maps. So to summarize a bit here, we have a few key takeaways we'd like to emphasize before we move on from our mapping analysis. So in this year's unsheltered point in time count, a smaller proportion of people were counted in central parts of Austin and Travis County, from approximately 34% counted in these central sections in 2020 to approximately 27% in 2023. City Council Districts 3 and 9 saw the largest percent decrease in the number of people counted. City Council Districts 1, 5, and 6 saw the largest percent increase in the number of people counted in those districts. The number of people counted by commissioner precinct was more evenly distributed in 2023 than it was in 2020. And a larger proportion of people were living in secluded areas like city-owned greenbelts, nature preserves, and parks in 2023 than they were in 2020. Now to get into some demographic analysis of the population that were interviewed and surveyed. So the largest age group identified in the 2023 PIT count were between the ages of 35 to 44 years old. This group is also most likely to be living unsheltered, based on the chart to the right, where the orange bars show the proportion of that group that is unsheltered, and the dark blue bars show the proportion that are sheltered. So based on that chart, the age group most likely to be living in shelters are children under the age of 18. As you can see here, men and boys are overrepresented in the population who were identified in the 2023 PIT count, with about 63% of the population being men and boys. This group is also more likely to be unsheltered than are women and girls in our count. Now looking at race, the largest racial group in the 2023 PIT count was white. It is worth noting, however, that although there were more white people than Black counted in the PIT count, the Black community is significantly overrepresented in the population experiencing homelessness. When you look at the racial breakdown of this population versus the overall population of the Travis County community, white people are relatively more likely to be unsheltered. And I'd also like to draw attention to the Native American population, who are most likely to be unsheltered based on the results of this year's count. The Hispanic and Latinx population comprises about a third of the population identified in the 2023 PIT count. This population is relatively more likely to be residing in the shelter system. Veterans are overrepresented in the population experiencing homelessness, with almost 10% of people identified in the 2023 PIT count self-reporting veteran status. This group was substantially more likely to be living unsheltered as well. So just to note some demographic changes from 2020 to 2023, as all of the charts we just looked at were 2023 data alone. So as for age, a smaller percentage of people counted were under the age of 25 in 2023. So that has decreased from 26% in 2020 to about 22 in 2023. A smaller percentage of people counted were under the age of 18 in 2023 as well. So from about 19% in 2020 to about 16 in 2023. We also saw a smaller percentage of unaccompanied youth counted in the population experiencing homelessness. So decreased by about 1 percentage point there. We saw a relatively larger number of men and boys counted in 2023 relative to 2020, just by a little bit. As for race and ethnicity, we saw a slightly smaller percentage of Black people counted in the point in time count in 2023. So a decrease from 36.5% to about 33%. And a larger percentage of Hispanic and Latinx people. So an increase from about 30% to about 34%. We also saw that the proportion of Asian and Native American people counted doubled between 2020 to 2023. As for veteran status, we saw a slight decrease in our veteran population. So from about 10.1% in the 2020 count to 9.5% in the 2023 count.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Another question that volunteers asked during the Unsheltered count is whether this was someone's first time experiencing homelessness. So as you can see here, about 42% of people on that night said that this was their first time experiencing homelessness. Volunteers also asked people where they first experienced homelessness. As you can see here, almost 3 out of 4 people, or 75% of those who were unsheltered, first experienced homelessness in Austin. Another 1 in 6, or 16%, first experienced homelessness not in Austin, outside of Austin, but in Texas. And then the remaining 9% first became homeless outside of Texas. So looking at these 2 pieces of data and comparing them to our last in-person count in 2020, we noticed 2 things. One is that a larger percentage of people this year were experiencing homelessness for the first time. And second, a larger percentage of people first experienced homelessness in Austin in this year's count compared to the 2020 count. Specifically, this number jumped 11 percentage points. Okay, now that we've gone through all of the PIT data, we think it's important to discuss the limitations of the count. While the PIT count provides us a lot of good information and it gives volunteers an opportunity to be engaged and better understand homelessness, the PIT count has a few important limitations. The first is that PIT methods are different across the country. While HUD provides some guidance, communities use different methodologies to conduct the count. A second limitation is that the PIT count does not capture the transitory nature of homelessness. There may be many people who are experiencing homelessness on that night that were not counted by volunteers. And there may be many others who on that night were experiencing housing insecurity, but who within 2 weeks or months are experiencing, within weeks or months are experiencing literal homelessness. Because the PIT count will miss these folks, a better way to reflect the transitory nature of homelessness is with the use of administrative data, which we will discuss shortly. Other limitations of the PIT are that people experiencing homelessness who are in institutions such as hospitals or jails would not be counted. Further, because of HUD guidelines, people can only be counted if they are seen. That means that people in tents who are not visible, who are sleeping or sheltering from the weather, would not be counted. And others who want to stay out of the public spotlight would be much more difficult to count. And this is especially the case in communities that criminalize public camping, such as our own. Finally, counts vary due to weather, geography, level of volunteer engagement. We had great volunteer engagement this year, but it was also raining for most of the count, which may lead to undercounting. So following up on the previous slide, we do have some supplementary data from the Travis County Sheriff's Office that gives us a sense of the prevalence of homelessness among those who are in jail. So on the night of the PIT count, there were approximately 700 individuals in the central booking facility who the Sheriff's Office identified as experiencing homelessness. According to the Sheriff's Office, these 699 folks account for approximately 1/3 of everyone in jail that night. This is the highest percentage since data was first collected in 2011. There are 2 other things to note here. The people experiencing homelessness in jail are more likely to be male and more likely to be younger than the overall population experiencing homelessness. So as we mentioned before, because of the limitations of the PIT count, we have for the last 2 years or so been measuring the prevalence of homelessness using administrative data and updating that data on our dashboard every month. We count people who take a coordinated assessment, our local housing prioritization tool, and who report living unsheltered and who have had an interaction in the homelessness response system in the prior 6 months or so. This estimate better reflects the true scope of homelessness in Austin, Travis County, and because we have much more detailed information in our administrative data, we're able to address people's needs in a much more targeted way. So if you're interested in seeing what our dashboard estimates show and learn more about the differences between those estimates and the PIT count, here are some links that might be helpful at the bottom of the slide. And this slide just provides a brief overview of the differences between the dashboard estimates and the PIT count, and can be used as a reference when discussing the two different methods. So now we're going to shift to showing some data that helps us understand how the many service providers in our homelessness response system are addressing homelessness in our community. Two important pieces of information that allow us to do that are the number of people who exit homelessness to permanent housing and the capacity in the system to house people. We'll start with the former, the number of people who exit homelessness to permanent housing. This shows us that the total number of people by year that move into permanent housing. One main takeaway from this data is that there has been a generally upward trend in the number of people housed by the system. I'll focus specifically on the year 2022, last year. 788 people in 2022 required minimal housing assistance to move into permanent housing. This means that they were provided services or stayed in a shelter and were then able to move into permanent housing on their own. Those represented by the orange or purple bars were provided more intensive permanent housing support by the system. Notably, more people moved into PSH, permanent supportive housing, which provides not just housing assistance, but also wraparound services. And more people moved into PSH in 2022 than in any other year. Move-ins into rapid rehousing did go down in 2022, but we anticipate with new rapid rehousing resources coming online at the end of 2022 and early 2023, that number should go back up. This figure shows the capacity of the system to provide shelter and permanent housing for people. Again, the general trend is that the system's capacity, which reflects new resources in the community, has increased in recent years. This is most notable with our capacity to house people in PSH, permanent supportive housing, which is a critical intervention that supports those with the most acute needs in our community and who have been chronically homeless. One thing to note about these figures is that per HUD requirements, the rapid rehousing capacity numbers shown in the purple bars here is not a true reflection of capacity and indicates how many people were housed in rapid rehousing the night of the PIT count. In reality, the system's capacity and ability to house people in rapid rehousing is more than double what is shown here. Because a number of rapid rehousing projects are relatively new, people housed in rapid rehousing, that number should go up throughout the coming year. So to summarize the last two slides, the key takeaways is that more people are moving into permanent housing and the system's capacity to house people is increasing. In particular, more people moved into permanent supportive housing than any other year, and the system's capacity to house people in permanent supportive housing has increased significantly. Has increased by 59% since 2019. Shelter capacity has also increased since 2019, but not as much as permanent supportive housing. We want to discuss one more piece of data that makes us even more optimistic that our capacity to house people, to house those most in need, will increase in the coming years. As a result of more resources in the community, especially ones dedicated to capital projects, we anticipate more site-based PSH units coming online in the next 3 years. In contrast to tenant-based permanent supportive housing, site-based permanent supportive housing, as the name implies, are units dedicated to permanent supportive housing and wraparound services at one site. And those provide people exiting homelessness with community and with ready access to the services that they need. We anticipate more than 1,000 of these units will be available by the end of 2023. we anticipate more than 1,000 new units will be available by the end of 2025, and approximately a quarter to a third of those units will hopefully be ready by the end of this year. Finally, we want to thank all of the more than 700 volunteers who helped make the Unsheltered count possible. This is a massive undertaking, and collecting pit data would not be possible without all of the volunteers who came out to make care kits, to lead teams, be team leads, and then in the middle of the night come out and count people with their family and friends and with others in the community. If you'd like more information, we have a lot more data on our website. We have reports. We publish reports that look at our needs and gaps in our community and look at racial disparities in our community. And we do that on an annual basis. We will be publishing those in the next couple of months. But last year's are available online at the first link here under data and reports. We also, if you're interested in our dashboard estimate, which looks not just at our estimate of how many people are experiencing homelessness, but how many people are moving into housing on a monthly basis, how much capacity there is in the system. All of that information is on our dashboard and is updated regularly. And the link for that is here as well. All right, thank you.